Chapter 1. Just another Monday. I remember that day like it was yesterday, despite both my sister and I being relatively young at the time. They called it a factory mishap, like some screw had simply come loose all on its own and no one was at fault. I didn't agree, but I was too young to argue their logic. When they told us that our parents had perished, both of them together, our reactions differed greatly. I distinctly remember laughing, telling them it wasn't possible, that it was all a stupid joke and that they should shut their mouths. I remember yelling, shoving anyone within pushing distance, demanding they tell the truth, demanding they tell me anything other than what they were telling me. Yet, they didn't. I remember being indignant, disbelief clouding my brain until every bit of sanity dripped out of my body like there was a gigantic, irreparable leak in my heart. Then the only thing left behind was anger and confusion. Unlike me, January did believe them, every single horrible word, and unlike me, she was crushed. The whimpering sound she initially made gave way to full-on sobs, and as she collapsed at my hooves, a torrential downpour began outside, rain slashing through the sky in angry silver streaks to pound at the ground unforgivingly. A storm to outmatch any storm she'd ever created. But no matter how different our reactions were, things had already changed forever. No amount of disbelief on my part or depression on her part would ever change that. No storm could wash that away. No fire could burn it from existence. The truth was there, no matter how we reacted to it. We were then the sole heirs of the Season Falls season factory, and even though both of us wished we could turn back time, it was impossible. Our new reality was set, and our futures were changed forever. The Season Falls factory. It was a family business that our parents had tirelessly supported until their very last day. The truth is that the ponies living in Season Falls are stupidly lucky. I mean, crazy lucky. Not only was every season perfect, but it lasted just long enough, was just the right temperature, and every element of nature reacted naturally like they should. Every season, every year, all the time. But that was only because of the Season Falls factory and the ponies that dedicated their lives to keeping it running, year in, year out. Our mother, February Breeze, controlled the cool seasons. She created the perfect winters. Months of light fluffy snow, delicately chilled winds, and the most dazzling solstice sunrises you could ever wish to see. No blizzards, no snowed-in houses, and no casualties caused by trees falling over or roofs caving in. Everything was fine-tuned to perfection. Our father, August Haze, controlled the hot seasons. His summers were picturesque, the waters in the rivers cool and refreshing, the sun just hot enough to warm your body, and the trees always sporting vibrant green leaves that filtered the rays of light just so, creating dappled spots of shade. Together, they were the epitome of perfection. February and August, the balanced season stabilizers. And as such, the populace worshipped them, as they should. Without our parents, the seasons would have been majorly screwed up. Many ponies had tried and failed to control the seasons over the years, and yet no pony or team of ponies had been up to the monumental task. And that was why the factory was created in the first place. A workspace for our parents where they could carefully manufacture the perfect clouds, engineer the most receptive trees to plant, and bring up families of keystone species to populate the land. When we were young, January and I would get under their hooves each day, cantering around the factory, asking endless questions about what it was they were doing. It was almost magical back then, the whole idea of their job at the factory. And honestly, it was more like something from a dream than normal work. But that dream was probably closer to a nightmare than we'd ever imagined. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go back a step. Our father was a unicorn, from a long, proud family of unicorns that were taught to never mingle with Pegasi. But when he met our mother, those things kind of faded into the background. She was a Pegasus who'd never touched foot on solid land before. He was the stallion who brought her to Earth for the first time with his devilish smile and knack for controlling perfectly warm weather, something she couldn't tolerate until she met him and experienced his controlled seasons for the first time. She was like him, possessing a gift she'd been born with. However, it was a gift that was innate. There wasn't a single hint of unicorn magic circulating in her blood. It didn't matter that she didn't have a horn or had never seen a unicorn in her life. Much like him, she had the ability to exert control over the cooled seasons. A gift her family had tried to hide from her as she'd grown up, kept away from the others and forbidden to travel to the earth below. They were married a year after meeting, but when they would retell the story, both of them would say that it wasn't hardly that long. However, I know for certain that it was. Because before they founded the Season Falls factory, or just Season for short, there was a documented time when the elements of each season raged out of control. Unicorns were helpless, earth ponies were oppressed, and Pegasi refused to leave their cloud villages. The hope of an alicorn coming to the rescue was lost with each passing year. Until our parents stopped the horror, reined in the dismay, and made the town of Season Falls into an oasis. Well, for a short time. Then that all changed, because then they died. I've walked this hall many times, scraping my horn against the walls until they chip, grumbling under my breath until the words fade away into something I can't even understand, and hating every single second as it passes. It's Monday again. Another Monday and a crazy line of Mondays that just seem to go on and on forever, each one considerably worse than the last. Any moment now, she'll come stumbling through the door, her breath coming in short gasps, her mane slightly less perfect than that morning when we ate breakfast together. And then she'll begin to tell me about all the things I already know are going wrong, reminding me about all the tasks I refuse to do, all the things she needs help with, etc., etc. Then I'll lose my cool, yell at her, and then she'll leave, and I'll go back to pacing and waiting for Tuesday. Now don't get me wrong, I love my sister. In fact, she's great. She's got an even temper, unlike me, she's pretty, unlike me, and she's never too busy to offer a listening ear. I used to really value those traits. But honestly, since our parents died years ago, our relationship has been so patchy, you couldn't repair it with glue and TLC, even if you spent years working on it. And that's not because we don't get along at times, or because we don't sometimes enjoy the same seasons, or even because she and I don't still tend to find common ground when it comes to stupid things. It's because we don't agree on the big things. More specifically, factory-related things. And probably because I envy her. Unlike me, she's never wrong. Not in the eyes of the staff or even in the eyes of the townsponies. Now again, don't get me wrong, ever since we've been in charge of Season, things have been slowly going to heck. But for some reason, she's never at fault, and the others just seem to go on idolizing her and dismissing me. Like, just because I'm the darker sister, the failings are all my fault, naturally. It's almost like they think if they just believe in her enough, she'll fix things. And if they just ignore me for long enough, I'll go away and things will go back to the way they had been when our parents were in charge, in time. Which is incredibly stupid and shallow beyond belief. Neither of those things are going to happen. I stop, the sound of my hoofbeats going quiet as I yank my horn away from the wall. A few loose pieces of concrete hit the floor, crumbling into a sad little pile. I wait. Inhale, exhale, and close my eyes. I can hear approaching hoofbeats, drumming out a frantic rhythm on the tile, drawing nearer with each second. And then it happens. The doorway is tossed open, January leaning through the opening like she can barely stand on her own 4 hooves, her tail swishing in clear agitation behind her. Like our mother, she is a vision, even when she's got a look on her face that's crafted from total and utter despair. Her mane's the deepest combination of black and blue clouds, speckles of white stars glittering in each strand. If you look deep into her eyes, you'll see the northern lights, hues of pink, blue, yellow, and green shimmering behind both overly large irises. Her soft blue coat is always perfectly brushed, her hooves polished, her demure eyes raised as if she doesn't even realize how crazy attractive she is, even when she's panicking. Not that I'd ever admit that. At least not out loud, that is. "September!" she gasps, her mouth hanging open as she blinks, long lashes casting shadows across both flushed cheeks. "I'm busy," I grunt, shaking my mane out and turning back to the wall. "Please, September, just listen, just for today. It's..." She swallows, composing herself as she presses a hoof to her chest. "It's very important." I grind my horn into the wall until it crumbles, more concrete falling away. The pressure focuses me, and I block out the horror radiating off of her. Not important, not my problem. Go away. Important is keeping the seasons in check, I bite. Important is making sure that the Season Falls residents don't come up here and witch hunt us because we're failing to do that. Important is me staying in this hall so I don't go down there and burn their entire little town until there's nothing left but piles of unhappy rubble. Important is making sure that their news department can't publish another paper trashing our family name, which, in case you're not aware, is something I'm incapable of fixing. Unless, of course, you count on me burning down that department before they can actually get their work to the press. January blinks, tears filling her eyes. Good. I think. You should be scared, because I'm not joking. Even you just standing here in front of me right now is dangerous. Because when I look at you, it reminds me of Mom, slight-framed and gentle. But the truth is, Mom isn't here. Not anymore. And when my temper flares, it makes me think of Dad. Because he was the exact opposite, always even-tempered and measured. But he's not here either. You just have me, January, I think. And I'm ruled completely by the anger that came to life when they stopped breathing. That's all there is now. That's all I have. I glare at her. Important is me, right here, doing what I'm doing until you set them straight. Because that's something that unless you want carnage, I can't help you with. I realize I'm yelling pretty darn loud when she shrinks back against the wall, her slim body trembling against the surface like I'm a harsh wind and she's the last leaf on a weather-stripped tree. But, September, she says, her voice watered down into a thin whisper. She blinks, I stare back at her, and neither of us say anything. The silence stokes my anger until it's ready to explode. Say something, dang it. She blinks again. I narrow my eyes. Then I lose it. What? I scream. She cringes, closing her eyes for a moment before opening them one by one and staring back up at me. Yeah, I think. I'm still here. Explain. We have a visitor, she says, casting her gaze to the floor now. She won't look me in the eyes anymore, which means that once again I did it. Took it too far and now she's completely shutting down. One day when I go too far, yell too loudly, or give her an unedited piece of my mind, I swear she'll up and have a heart attack, crash to the floor, and never get back up. Then, consequently, I'll probably feel like the giant idiot that I am. But today is not that day. Who the heck came all the way up here to see us on a Monday? I demand, flicking bits of rubble off my flank with the end of my tail. January's ears lie flat against her neck, her eyes still fixed on the ground. And she still won't look at me. Not eye to eye, that is. Heck, I could be a stranger. That's how uncomfortable she is, squirming around, avoiding my gaze like I'm someone she barely knows and definitely doesn't trust. We used to be close. We used to understand each other. I used to talk softly to her, and she used to stand up for me. But those days are long gone. Now we're more like enemies than sisters. We disagree on just about everything. How to run the factory, how to handle PR interviews, how to deal with issues among the staff, literally all of it. But for some reason, I'm always the bad guy. It's like I hold all the anger that she'll never feel, and then I spit it out for both of us when I've had enough. It doesn't take a lot to push me over the edge, so I explode, and normally when I do, all eyes are on me. No one realizes that although she's as quiet as a mouse, standing in my shadow most of the time, she knows how to press my buttons like a natural-born mechanic. I'm the one who screws things up, bearing the anger she feels but won't express, and she's the one who keeps up pretenses, pretending everything's fine with us, even when it's not. We've fallen into these toxic roles now that Mom and Dad are gone, and I don't think either of us really knows how to change that. She stammers, backing up again until her flank hits the wall. Then, her eyes still avoiding mine, she slides down until she's seated on the floor, lowering her head while fresh tears dance in her eyes. It's Satin's spell, she mutters. She knows full well that I'm about to fly off the handle, but even her own trepidation isn't enough to stop me from going off. What? I shout, stomping forward. Don't tell me you let her in. Please tell me you're smarter than that, Jan. Seriously. But I've yelled at her enough, and now she's crying, crystal tears falling from both eyes. I watch in frustration as they form into perfect miniature snowflakes midair, falling to the floor and drying up against the tile until they're nothing more than little wet spots against the white. It's past time to try and think of alternatives. She won't talk to me once she's crying, and I usually won't yell at her after she's crying, so we're both back to where we started. Neither of us changing, nothing getting done. Never mind, since you can't seem to do it on your own, I'll go tell her that we're busy. We don't have time to deal with her, or her husband, or any pony for that matter. Since you won't say it, I guess I will. Go ahead and blame me, I'm used to it, I mutter, hoping that that'll fix things. But even after I've said it, the words and their implications still rot in my mouth. That was me actually trying to sound helpful. But really, I just sound like a tyrant, and she's still sitting there shivering and crying like a sad portrait of grief set up in the corner. So in all truthfulness, I still haven't fixed anything. Now, not only have I yelled at her and made her cry, but I've insulted her too. Way to go, September, you're really winning today. Even though I want to stuff all those words back down my throat, I can't. Our mother always used to say you can't pick up spilt water, so be careful not to spill it. But no matter how hard I try, I'm always spilling something somewhere, and at the worst of times too. So in my mind, there's no need to try and fix that if it's already gonna happen anyway. That'd just be a waste of both of our time. I storm past January, a trail of rubble following me as I leave her alone in the hallway to cry. Someone has to step up and deal with things. Someone who can do more than simply smile, say kind words, and think that that's gonna fix everything. Today that somebody is me. Satin's spell is a piece of work. She thinks she owns the world just because she can regularly bathe in a steady flow of cash, courtesy of the only stallion who will actually put up with her after having known her for more than a couple of minutes. Said stallion put a ring on her horn and married her, but the locals in Season Falls always gossiped about his true intentions. See, regardless of his business-worthy brain, he was a cold stallion, one who allowed Satin to remain near him simply based on the fact that she was easy on the eyes, supposedly. I still can't understand what makes her attractive at all. I remember when they first got married. It was such an extravagant event that we had been nearly forced to attend. It would have looked downright stupid if the stabilizers of Season didn't show up at some point, so January had bugged me until I'd given in just to shut her up. It was over the top, showy, and their first kiss, muzzle to muzzle, hadn't even lasted for a full second. She was his prize, his showpiece, not his mate. And he made that apparent whenever they were together. Their relationship was nothing like our parents', but that's not why I still hate her to this day. In fact, there are so many reasons I can't stand her that it'd take a small lifetime to write them all down. But to be fair, the biggest one right now is the fact that she wants to take over the factory. Not a shock, really. She has everything money can buy but ultimate power. After all, we're the ones who control the seasons. We make the ponies down in Season Falls dependent upon us, even when my sister and I do a crummy job. They still look up to us for help, for assistance, for stability. In short, they need us. No one needs Satin. So when I trudge into the main atrium, harsh morning sunlight shining in from the skylights on our pristine marble floors, and see her standing there flanked by two of her servants, I remind myself that she's here in our factory, not her mansion, and I'm in charge here, not her. I let my eyes crawl up her slim frame, noting that the overcoat she's wearing is new, the crisp white hue complementing her fair violet fur. She bats her long lashes at me, plum-colored eyeshadow spread across her lids like jam on toast. Then she raises a hoof to her neck, letting it travel down her mane slowly, her hoof readjusting a group of purple curls so that they sit against the opposite side of her slender neck. Her ears flicker at the sound of my hoofbeats, her eyes narrowing in my direction, and I realize that she's surveying my condition. Not like that should shock me. I feel her gaze drift over my mane judgmentally, noting its disarray, stray pieces still standing out due to restless sleep. And then she eyes my horn, her gaze noting the darkened tip where I've been driving it into the walls of the hallway. Pity flashes in her fuchsia eyes before she stows it away. September, just the mare I wanted to see. Her servants take a step back, bowing their heads as if they're not worthy of her words. Funny, but the feeling is anything but mutual, I nicker, closing my eyes as I try to make patience appear in my heart, even just a sliver. But I can't. It's impossible. I grind my teeth and raise a hoof to my right. Those are the doors, and you can see yourself out. She laughs, a little chuckle, like she feels sorry for me or something. Oh, don't say that. I only just got here, and you know what a frightful trip it is to come all the way up this mountain during daylight hours. I can feel my whole body begin to vibrate with anger so hot that it's dangerous. Yeah, that's because we don't expect visitors, I bite in response. She looks like she's about to say something else, but I continue. Ever. One of her servants smiles at my response, but turns away, like he's embarrassed and doesn't want to be too overt with his amusement. His reaction cools my temper a bit. At least I know that I'm not being completely irrational. And at least some pony found my sarcasm funny. Listen, I won't regale you with pleasantries. I'm here to speak business, September. Satin begins carefully. She's like one of those door-to-door sales ponies who January always humors. You know, the ones with overly large smiles to hide their staggeringly small customer satisfaction rates. Even so, January never seemed to mind listening to their entire song and dance, though she'd normally just politely decline them when the whole thing was finished. But as we've already touched on, I'm not January, and I am dog-tired of Satin dragging herself up here just to hear me say no like always. So I inhale and prepare to tell her what I tell her every time she appears in our doorway, with that stupid smile on her face and numeric figures in her head. But I can't say anything, because before you know it, she's up and talking again. You know, the last offer I gave you may have been a smidge misquoted on account of my appraiser making a small clerical mistake. She rolls her eyes, giving me another petite laugh before smoothing down the front of her business coat with a well-shined hoof. So, I'm prepared to offer you an increased amount for the factory this time. She uses her tail to slap at the stallion on her right, and he offers her an envelope from within his jacket. She doesn't bother to thank him, taking control of the envelope with a nod of her horn, dusk-colored light surrounding it and urging it in my direction. I'm certain you're smart enough to realize what sort of an opportunity I'm giving you both, though I always did find you to be far more business-minded than your sister. In fact, But I don't let her finish. I've heard more than enough. Something about her insulting January just makes my blood boil. Like, alright, it's okay for me. After all, we're sisters, we fight. But nowhere near okay for her. She's not family and never will be. No amount of money is gonna change that. I don't need to try and make sense of my other feelings because they don't matter. Right now, my hate for Satin rises to the top. And just like that, I'm no longer in control of that emotion. It's crazy, wild, volatile, and most of all, the same temperature as a scorching summer. Before she can come up with another carefully timed insult, I bow my head, flames leaping from the tip of my horn and crawling across the floor in her direction. They bloom like spring flowers, jumping upward while their lively tongues flick at the air. Immediately, heat envelops the space, spreading outward like rolling fog, smoke already choking the air in front of us. Their reaction is immediate. The threesome shrinking back in abrupt horror, their hooves quickly carrying them backward as my fire approaches. Get out, I say, the golden glow of the blaze highlighting Satin's widened eyes. Even though there's more distance between us now, I can see small reflections of the burning inferno on the floor dancing inside them hypnotically. It's enough to see that she's concerned, but not enough to get the real message across. This has to stop, now. So, even though I want to set her aflame, I decide to burn something else. Between us, the envelope she'd offered me goes up in flames, the charred ashes fluttering to the floor before me like so many startled butterflies. Satin huffs, shaking her head, disturbed curls bouncing across her withers. You're deaf to reason, even when it arrives conveniently on your doorstep. Such a pity. Her words are sharp, like swords, and I take that as the threat that it is. You should know by now that I don't listen to ponies who think with their pocketbooks, I shout, finally done with our back and forth banter. It's time to end this. But since they're simply not getting the memo and my fire is apparently too tame for them, I move instead. Taking a step forward, I hush the fire around me, marching toward her insistently, my horn still spewing tendrils of smoke. Even though she's standing her ground, both of her servants have begun to back up, and after a few moments of anxious motionlessness, she finally follows, stumbling backward out of my reach. And, just so this is clear to you and makes some sort of sense in your tiny little mind, I will never— The flames I'd quieted spark with my rage, spreading around me in a brilliant circle. Ever! My loud words make her flinch, her eyebrows rising in question. Take your offer. Even if you tromp up here every other day with another zero added to that check. My words seem to sink in, and I watch her gaze harden with frustration. But even so, she's not winning today. With that final comment, I close the space, backing her and her entourage up until they're nearly at the entrance again, my flames blocking every exit but the one behind them. The message is and should be very clear. This is goodbye. But I want to make sure that they understand that, so I add the final blow. And you can tell your appraiser that the price tag on this place is one that no one in the history of Season Falls could ever pay in 10,000 lifetimes. Satisfied with myself, I use my horn to shove the doors open remotely, red light pushing them backward at my urging. She relents, finally giving up and backtracking, her servants matching her pace. And just like that, the pony who ruined my morning is tossed out like the trash. Check, fancy servants and all. But as I turn away, using my tail to hush the remaining flames until they disappear, I catch a hateful glare from Satin. I can still see her, her form outlined in the nearly closed doors, staring at me like she'd like to see me put on ice. I'll tell you what the best part is, though. I don't care. In fact, to be honest, I don't care about anything anymore. She is like everything else in my life, broken, irritating, and a source of constant annoyance. If she suddenly and spontaneously combusted tomorrow, it'd be no fur off of my back. But as the controller of all heated seasonal elements, I know that option would only lead to my own downfall. And I'm not ready to go down yet, not even close. As Satin and her troop leave, I go to the only pony who actually listens to me. I know from experience that if I go to January, she'll try to placate me. But Nova is different. He's worked at Season since he was a foal, trailing along behind his father obediently every day so that he could learn how things work. When his father moved away shortly after our parents died, Nova took up his place as our main mechanic, and he fit right in. I mean, he could literally do the job of caring for the machinery all by himself with both hooves over his eyes, and still do that job well enough that no one would know. He's just that good. January and I store small amounts of our power in monolithic machines that live deep in the recesses of the Season factory. That energy is then saved for later so that we can make small changes to the seasons if they require it. We're completely in charge of the season's stability from start to finish, but we can only make huge weather changes with the assistance of stored power, and only once per season. If a winter is too cold too soon, then January can't just up and change that in its entirety after initiating the season's start. To do so requires her to override my control so that winter can replace fall. She has to wage war against the changes I've held in place all summer. But once she wins, ushering out the old season and welcoming in the new one, her power will be at an all-time low. So if a major change was needed, she'd rely on the power that she'd stored up in the aptly named overdump machines to make that happen. Likewise, I do the same thing. Whenever we have the time, we come in and seal away some of our power, storing it so that we can access it later on if needed. Nova's job is making sure that the overdump machines are in working order, and he does that along with a team of other maintenance ponies. Though it has to be said, he's probably the most talented, even though he's the youngest. The rest of the staff are all considerably older than him, so they definitely keep him on his hooves, making sure he's busy doing the tasks that the rest of them find taxing. But somehow, someway, he always has time to humor me when I feel the need to vent. When I stomp into the overdump room, he's there, standing before January's storage vault with a clipboard hovering above his eyeline, encased in blue light. I know just by observing him that he's been working hard today because he has his long, straight raven black mane pulled back in a ponytail, and likewise, his tail has been gathered up into a bun, held together with thick blue straps. Still, despite all of that, a few loose pieces hang down his neck, and shaggy bangs threaten to hide his deep azure eyes. I admire him for a moment, considering my options. But as memories of the interaction with Satin and her goons come back into my mind, the same overwhelming fury bubbles back up, and before I know what I'm doing, I'm yelling again. "Nova!" I bark, standing in the middle of the room as I eye the storage vault. His gaze flickers away from the clipboard, and his ears swivel in my direction. But the shock that flashed across his face vanishes when he sees that it's me, not one of his superiors. His eyes soften. "Come to tell me how the day's offended you already?" he jokes, plucking the clipboard from the air and settling it into the crook of his leg. I flick my tail in annoyance, pinning my ears as irritation makes the fur on the back of my neck lift. Guess who just decided to flounce on in here all high and mighty and offer me another check? He smiles, obviously knowing exactly who I'm talking about. But here's what I love about him. He doesn't answer. He knows that it's a rhetorical question, one that I want to answer myself. And so he stays quiet, and I reply. "Satin spell," I spit, the name like poison on my tongue. "Really now?" He turns away from me slightly, nosing a lever on January's storage container as he seals it and the activation panel glows happily. Apparently, January's already been by to make her contribution. I, on the other hand, haven't. I'd been far too busy entertaining our unwanted guests. Yeah, she was here again. Heck that mare, I mean seriously. I could have burned her alive. That's how angry she made me. Better yet, get this. On top of coming all the way up here on a Monday of all days, she actually had the guts to... I stopped myself. I was going to say insult January, but something in the back of my mind won't let me finish that sentence. Because that's my job, I think. I insult January. And for some reason, it's okay when I do it. Just not when others do it. Where is the logic in that, really? The feeling is like a stone dropped into my gut, and it doesn't move even when Nova's eyebrows raise. She had the guts to... I pause. Make another stupid offer on the factory, I finish, avoiding his gaze as I pretend to suddenly find the marble floors really, really interesting. Heads up, they're not. She's pretty persistent, isn't she? He asks, clearly trying to gauge my reaction as he follows me with concern in his eyes. Like mud on the inside of your hoof, I mutter, glancing at the floor now, like it's officially become public enemy number 2. Is she still here? Nova questions, flipping a page on his clipboard and folding it neatly over the back. No. All I left in her tracks was ash. He can tell that I'm murderously angry, and maybe that's why he changes the subject. Did you want to make a contribution today, September? He's good. He knows that I normally try to make more of a contribution than my sister, even if she is the early riser. It's like a silent competition between us. But with a quick sidelong glance at her storage vault, I can tell that her measured contribution is still a half a foot or so below mine. From the long window set in its side, I can see flurries, soft baby blue snowflakes dancing in the air, their happy movements accompanied by downy white feathers, her power personified in 2 natural elements. Unlike her peaceful storage container, mine is riotous. Inside is a tornado of red leaves, glaringly hot clouds of heated steam, and a fractured mix of knife-like beams the color of summer lightning. Yeah, we're that different. Her vault sings. Mine literally screams. Her vault pleases the ponies of season falls and draws them out to enjoy the outdoors, to dance in the snow, enjoy the cool, crisp air, and relish the welcome change in tone. Mine reminds them that they're at the mercy of my season. It sends them rushing for shade or crawling back to their houses with sunburnt flanks. My father? Gosh, he was so unlike me. His seasons were actually ones that were cherished. He knew how to get all of the elements right. Just a bit of this, a bit of that, and no one complained. Mine? They're nothing like his. Not even close. And that gap, that huge gap, is one that makes it hard for me to sleep at night. His heritage, the one I'm supposed to be upholding, is literally crumbling in my hooves, and every day there's less and less to cling to. September, Nova interrupts, cutting into my retrospection. Did you want to make a contribution? I can go make repairs elsewhere if you like the space to yourself. Yeah, no. My monosyllabic answer hangs in the air between us as I turn away from him, letting a few long crimson bangs cover my face. I don't know if the action is soon enough, but I kinda hope that it would hide the disappointment that I'm sure is probably in my eyes. He can't see me like this, actually thinking about remorse. I'm the strong one, the one who does what has to be done even if it sucks, the one who says what every pony is afraid of saying, the one who makes stuff happen and doesn't care about ruffling ponies' fur in the process. But right now, I am so frustrated I could scream. Really and truly. However, I don't, because that'd be a true sign of desperation, one that Nova definitely couldn't ignore. I have to get away from him, go somewhere quiet and let this frustration loose. But first, I have to make a very composed escape so he won't follow me. I nod and then turn away from him, clearly planning on plodding off dutifully to go blow off some steam. He is not letting that happen though, because just as I've turned away, he steps around me so that he's standing right smack dab in the middle of my path. I am about to bite into him for getting too close when I realize that he's not looking at me, but rather beyond me. And he hasn't just stepped around me to try and see my face. He's actually stepped around me to be nearer to me, almost like a shield. Something has him on high alert. And I don't even have to turn around to know what it is. Raising my muzzle, I can see a steely reflection in the clear, clean glass of January's storage tank. It's stormy weather. The elderly stallion who's been keeping our finances in order ever since I could remember. He used to be crazy close to our parents, like insanely close. He was at every birthday party of ours, every event of theirs, and never failed to show at a fundraising party or charity drive. Heck, the old pony even made appearances in town to put out the good word when we opened up the factory on a few occasions for guided tours that were supposed to involve the town's ponies and bring in some extra funds. That was another thing my parents were very good at. Entertaining the populace and educating them on the importance of the season factory in general. To put it in perspective, I haven't held a fundraising event or a tour or a charity drive since my parents died. And even though January has come to me a hoofful of times, I've turned her down. The truth is we can't fill their horseshoes, so why even try? That's my view on the whole thing. But now, as Stormy Weather enters the storage room, I can tell that he's just as angry externally as I am internally. September Rim. His voice is like thunder, and I roll my eyes at Nova, mouthing, "Why?" But his gaze darts away from mine, lifts towards Stormy's, and then lowers to the floor. He can't help me here. Turning around in one swift motion, I feel my haunches stiffen as I force myself to sit down on the floor, facing the pony of the hour. My thought is, if I'm sitting down, I can't make it up the stairs, where Stormy is currently standing, and if I can't do that, then I also can't hurt him physically, which is exactly what I feel like doing right now, that he's all but called my name out like a curse. Why? Because he's old. Hurting the elderly would be a low blow, even for me. In fact, he's not just old, but older than any of the other workers. Twin puffs of gray hair making up his mane and tail like two misplaced clouds hovering above unhappy, smoke-colored fur. His eyes tell the story of a life long lived, and he always moves with this quiet deliverance that frustrates the living heck out of me. Like even if the world was ending, he'd be there, plodding on in slow motion. I curl my tail around my front legs as he takes the steps one at a time, finally arriving at the bottom of the spiral staircase before us. Then he cants his head towards my confidant. "Nova, I believe the cooling station's temperature meter is malfunctioning." That's as close as he'll get to saying, "Go away," and Nova hears him loud and clear. "I'll go take a look at it, Mr. Weathers. Let me know if you need anything." Then, with a pitying look at me, he shrugs helplessly, holds his clipboard a bit tighter, and trots off. Once again, I'm alone. I grind my teeth, trying to keep calm as my last chance at deliverance fades, his hoofbeats going quiet. "Why don't the two of us step into my office for a little chat?" Stormy says. From where I'm sitting, I can't miss the clear disappointment on his face, like I went into his house at night and burnt all of his furniture while he was sleeping. "Actually, I was just on my way to..." But he cuts me off. "Forgive me for phrasing that like a question. It wasn't." And I know I'm in for it now. Whether I like it or not, this day just got a whole lot worse, and there was no way for my sister to sweep in and rescue me with her soft words and bright ideas this time. Once again, I was completely on my own. I'd made my bed, and consequently, I had to sleep in it. Hi guys, thank you all so much for tuning in to the first chapter of the book that I wrote called The Silence of the Seasons. I am so bad at reading stuff over, and I'm just cringing, like looking back at like the voices that I put to some of this stuff. It looks a lot better in writing than it does when I read it out. I feel like it makes more sense that way. And to be fair, I actually wrote this entire series in 2018, so it's a really old piece. I say really old, but old enough. This first chapter was written on June 16th, 2018, so I'm definitely digging this out of the mothballs for this project, but I had you guys vote, and you said you wanted to hear it, so I went back in, I opened up this super old Pages document, and did a little bit of editing, but most of the content is still the same as it was back in 2018, with just a little few fixes here and there. But yeah, so that is the very first chapter. If this video is popular, I don't want to sound conceited. If this video does well and you would like to hear chapter 2, I will consider doing that. I'm gonna have to remember the voices I did for, all the characters. Okay, it is literally almost 2 in the morning and I've stayed up super late to record this when the house is quiet and all of the animals are asleep, so I am gonna go pretend like I can also sleep, and I will see you guys in the next project. If you'd like to hear more of this book, let me know down in the comments section, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Alright, Miles signing off. I love you guys and stay awesome. If you made it to the end of this, I'm really surprised. Like, I'm just now editing the audio for this, looking back, and I'm like, it is 41 minutes long now. I know it's not gonna be that long when I finish editing it. It's gonna drop down in size a bit, but if you made it all the way to however the hecking long this video is, good for you. Hopefully it was interesting enough to keep your attention. I have no idea. I've been reading it and my attention's all over the place, but that's because it's crazy time right now and I need to go. Okay, yeah. Click here for more content you might like, click here for content that's better than this, and go down below to tell me if you want to see more. Okay, bye.